The U.S. pork industry continues to monitor African swine fever developments after the deadly disease was discovered in the Dominican Republic and Haiti earlier this year. In this report, we take an in-depth look at what Iowa pork producers are doing on their farms to ensure that ASF stays out of the country.
If there was an outbreak of African swine fever, it would be devastating to the pork industry.
Essex, Iowa farmer Dennis Liliadal annually raises 2,500 to 3,000 hogs in a farrow-to-finish operation. He's also the president of the Iowa Pork Producers Association. Liliadal believes it's important for U.S. pig farmers to be aware of what's going on with African swine fever developments across the world. Like other producers, Liliadal is keeping a close eye on biosecurity efforts on his farm now that ASF has been confirmed in the Western Hemisphere for the first time in over 40 years.
In my mind, there's two things that are important: prevention and preparedness. We need to do everything we can to prevent African swine fever from entering the country. That's the best case scenario by far. So that's number one, and that's government agencies and the Border Patrol, farmers, travelers, everybody's kind of got to be aware that when they travel foreignly, that when they come back, to be careful they're not bringing any meat, or they haven't been on a farm and been properly quarantined afterwards. So that's the biosecurity steps, keeping track of the feed that's coming in, keep lines of separation, just standard biosecurity things that we do on our farms every day.
Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig says African swine fever is not a human health issue and certainly not a food safety issue. However, the disease would be devastating to the nation's pork industry.
We've been watching it very closely because, of course, things move all around the world, right? And on any given time, and we're involved in exports and imports, and so we're always watching, and there's concerns, and there's a need to be protecting our borders from a foreign animal disease coming in. But there is something about it being in the Western Hemisphere, in our neighborhood, close to the United States, that does make this situation with African swine fever very much top of mind. It's a good reminder that this is an ever-present threat.
Secretary Naig discusses the state's response plan to ASF.
One is we want to make sure that there's every effort being made to deal with foreign animal diseases where they are. That USDA is working with their counterparts, that the international community is focused on how do you contain and stamp out something like African swine fever where it is. Two, you try to keep it out of the United States, right? There's Customs and Border Protection and USDA that have layers of protection there to detect things at the border. We like to then say the next most important thing that you can focus on is how to keep it off of your farm. If it were in the United States, how would you keep it off of your farm? And what are the biosecurity protocols and measures that you've got to do every single day to try to, again, protect your operation, your buildings? And then what we think about at the Department of Agriculture here is, well, then if we get it, if we have a foreign animal disease, then are we prepared to respond? Because what happens in an FAD situation is, countries around the world will shut down their borders to us. They'll shut off trade, and so we know that that's a significant economic hit to the industry and to producers, but of course it's devastating to livestock producers themselves and their families and their operations. And so how do we ensure that, one, we're doing everything we can to get back to where we can export again, but two, how can we work together to try to, again, deal with the affected farms and get them back on their feet as quickly as we can as well. So it's economic at all levels, and that's the reason that we're so very much focused on it.
To learn more about the history of African swine fever, we reached out to Dr. Paul Sundberg from the Swine Health Information Center in Ames. Sundberg explains how the disease impacts pig populations and then describes what would happen economically if the virus were to be found in U.S. herds.
We've known about the African swine fever, hence the name, has been in Africa for decades and decades. But in 2007, it started to move. This particular serotype of ASF started to move from Africa up into the Balkan countries and up into Russia and Western Europe. That was a concern, but in 2007, it was found in China, and that's the largest pig population in the world. So that's a pretty big deal. African swine fever has been coined to be like volcanic lava. It moves relatively slowly, but it burns everything in its wake, and you can't stop it. It is a virus of pigs that will cause high mortality. For this particular serotype that is emerging around the world and causing this worldwide epidemic, it's close to 100% mortality should a pig get this virus. And the problem that we have with it is that it may look like a lot of other things that are already out on the farm right now. It may look like a bad PRRS infection. It may look like an enteric and systemic salmonella infection. There are a lot of things that are going on the farms right now that endemic disease that ASF could look like. So that's one of the biggest concerns about how we handle the virus, how we recognize it quickly, and how we can contain it.
Paul, can you talk further about, just the potential impacts ASF would have on the markets for the U.S.?
Yeah, there has been an updated study, an updated economic impact study. Dr. Dermot Hayes at Iowa State University led that effort. And it's estimated that should ASF be found in the US, well, of course, the first thing that will happen is we'll lose our international markets for pork. And we send approximately 25 to 30% of our production overseas. So if we get ASF into the US, that will stop right away. That means we have an extra 25 to 30% of production that's still here in the US. Because of that, prices will go down. Dr. Hayes estimates that if the virus is able to be contained within 2 years, then we have probable loss of 15 billion, and that's with a B, dollars to the national industry or the national economy. If it can't be contained within those 2 years and it goes out longer, the probability is that we'll be closer to 50 billion, 50 with a B, dollar impact to the US economy. So those are big numbers. And the one thing that just like national biosecurity, we talk about big ideas and big things, 15 billion to $50 billion worth of loss. That's not just loss to producers. That means farms go away. That means production goes away. And also all of the service industries, all of the service jobs, the feed industry is going to be affected. The service jobs, that the salesmen and all the animal health companies are going to be affected. It would be wide ranging, and it would be a very devastating economic blow.
Back on the farm in Essex, Liliadol says it's important for producers to have their premises IDs updated. This would help track the movement of pigs in the U.S. should an ASF detection occur.
National Pork Board has a free software program, AgView, that you can enter your premise ID, and when you get a group of pigs in, where they came from, and when you send them to a harvest facility, where they went. All those things will help track, if there is an outbreak, track down where it might be spreading to, and really protect your farm. If somebody 5 miles down the road breaks, but you have your records and the government can determine fairly quickly that you've not been exposed, it'll really help the situation on your farm, that there's a chance your farm will be released from quarantine sooner because they know they haven't been exposed.
Secretary Naig's final message is that deterring African swine fever from the homeland will always be a team effort.
To every livestock producer, I want you to know we're working hard. We're improving every day, but we really do need folks to look at their specific operation, their buildings, their people. How do they do business, and what are the specific things that they can do in their operation to be better prepared themselves?
As Liliadol stated, pork producers in Iowa take biosecurity seriously. For more information on African swine fever and tools and resources available for growers, visit porkcheckoff.org or check out the USDA Animal Plant Health and Inspection Service website. For the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, I'm Brent Barnett.